welcome to the second day of the ISDSI conference. We will start in a while, please, all of you. You can also try that spotlight. प्रदीप मैडम को दिखाइए. प्रदीप मैडम को दिखाइए उसको. Okay, madam. Thank you.
ठीक है, दूसरा वाला। हाँ ठीक है, दोनों ठीक है। हेलो।
Tuhin, yeah. So just to talk about brief profile of the speakers, we have Amy with us. So Amy, she is the regional head of South Asia for ASASB. Joining in 2004, Amy has worked with ASASB's member schools and served as the association's specialist advisor in India for 6 years. Prior to her relocation to Mumbai, India, Amy was manager of research at ASASB's US headquarters, where she contributed to research reports, including the globalization of business schools and impact research, a guide for business schools. Amy also represented ASASB at the UN Global Compact to co-convene the Principles of Responsible Management Education, PRME. She began her career at ASASB developing and executing conferences and seminars across 5 continents. So I'd like to ask Maitri if she can, facilitate her. Maitri? Yeah. Thank you. Next, we have Shikha with us, Shikha Tong. So with, yeah, okay. Yeah. So we have Shikha Tong with us. So a brief profile of her. So with over 17 years of professional experience, she has been an integral part of XLRI since 2015, currently serving as the accreditation officer. In this role, she manages both the national and international accreditation processes, ensuring the alignment with the global standards. Her responsibilities include overseeing accreditation processes and renewals of esteemed bodies such as ASASB, AMBA, EQUIS, NBA, and AICTE. Her work involves active participation in the process of improvement initiatives, contributing valuable insights to enhance operational efficiency, committed to maintaining XLRI's reputation for excellence in education. So thank you for joining with us, and thanks for your valuable time. So I'd just like to request you to, floor is yours, you can start with your presentation. On the dais, off the dais, whatever you think. So,
So we're going to come down because it's easier that way for us to connect with you. Okay, great. Okay, thank you all for being here today. We're going to do something a little bit different that I haven't done in one of these kinds of forums before, but it's a concept that keeps coming up over and over again around the world when it comes to the fast pace of change, the workload, the uncertainty that business schools are going under, which is how do we maintain quality, right? In the various places we need to maintain quality, how do we assure compliance with our national requirements? And how do we ensure compliance? How do we ensure our continuous improvement and ensure excellence in a global environment, right? And so the AACSB accreditation is an international accreditation. We have 1,000 accredited schools in more than 60 countries. So you can imagine one of the things that we do, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is we have to work with our schools to reduce the burden of accreditation, at the same time help institutions maximize the benefits of doing both. The national requirements and the international requirements. Because we believe that there's benefit to institutions doing both. And there's reasons for that. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to help sort of line up the requirements. So it's going to be a little bit technical. So if you're not really in depth with AACSB or the national accreditation and rankings requirements, this may be a little bit technical for you, but the idea is to show you and give you ideas about how you can do both. So that's number 3, identify strategies to do both. And also hopefully get rid of some of those myths that float around your institutions about what it means to do both. What is a must do? What is a nice to do? And what are some interesting ways that you can think about doing both that benefit your institution? So that's the idea today. We're going to walk you through what is expected of AACSB that lines up with what is expected in the national requirements. We're going to talk about where there are some misinterpretation challenges, and then we're also going to talk about strategies that you can bring back to your school and say, hey, you know what, maybe we don't have to make this harder on ourselves. Maybe we can come up with a way that we can achieve both without much duplication of effort. So first off though, we want to just ask a question, okay? And this is a question that comes up in every forum that I'm ever in when I'm talking about accreditation. What is quality, high quality education? So we're going to spend some time, and I know it's first thing in the morning. Hopefully all of you had your coffee. And how many of you are in the business of high quality education? How many? How many of you have committed your lives to high quality education? Right? Hopefully everyone in this room, right, in some way or another. So hopefully you have some ideas to share with us today about what is high quality education. And we are kind of talking in the realm of business education, so if you want to stick in business education, you can, but there's a lot of this that bleeds over into all types of higher education. What constitutes high quality education? So maybe sit with yourself, introduce, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So to me, high quality education means my name is Chandan Chaudhary. I'm a professor from Indian School of Business. So for me, high quality education means that we should be able to do some research which will have impact. Second, we should talk about high quality education, which means people who come in, full-time students, part-time students, or executive for learning. So the education imparted should be of high quality, such that when they go back, wherever they go back, they're able to make an impact. So first was research with impact, second is education with impact. And the third one, I would say that we need to engage. We need to outreach. We should have outreach. We should have engagement with society, engagement with government, engagement with industry, engagement with other academic institutions within our country, outside our country. So to me, these three are a very important thing. By the way, I love AACSB's approach because the three pillars that you talk about, that innovation, impact, engagement, I love them. Over to you.
Well, you just summarized our standards pretty well. Good job. No, but okay, so this is true, right? You have to have impact in the things that education institutions do, teaching, research, right? And then, but you don't exist just for teaching and research. You exist in a community, you exist for others outside of your institution, so there has to be engagement. So that's three very good things. Here.
So for me, high quality education starts with the mindset building, where when we are having dialogues with different stakeholders, it's in the form of proposals. So we are giving them proposals, and accordingly a mindset building where we are moving towards excellence. Second is, once the mindset building is happening, we move to taking actions, which is driven by motivation. And once the mindset and the motivation is set, the methodology comes into picture, because there are plethora of avenues, and thanks to the IT revolution, we have many methodology platforms available. But without the right mindset and the right drive to take the actions towards excellence, where everybody is thriving and not just surviving, higher education will not make the impact. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Kasturi Naik, and I represent Sparsh Global Business School. And Dr. Ravi Kumar Jain, he's the founding director there. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's this idea that you can impact not just attitudes, but you can impact behaviors, and you have an impact on the skills, right? The methodology, the things that people bring to their work, bring to the things that they do to have a benefit on society, right? So that's high quality education affects all of those components.
I feel it's equipping the audience to deal with tomorrow and navigate tomorrow with all the uncertainties.
Right. Tomorrow that we don't know what it looks like.
Equipping people or the audience with all the tools and all the skills that would probably be, or we ourselves don't know what skills will be there required tomorrow, but equipping them to deal with tomorrow. That is the question. Huh? I am from RSK Sharma from Geetam.
Thank you, sir.
It is good to know from where the...
Yeah, we're here to learn from one another. So where are you from?
I'm from Geetam.
Geetam, okay. In Vishakhapatnam, in the Hyderabad campus. Yeah.
High quality education is such that its impact on the society, academia, government, and all those which is related with education.
So high quality means you don't just impact business, you impact societal organizations and society.
Ma'am, to me, high quality education is about defining quality primarily. I am Professor Dr. Monodeep Roy Chaudhary. I am Professor of HR and OB in St. Xavier's University in Kolkata. My focus is that quality needs to be defined. Quality needs to be identified through benchmarking, and thereby understanding of the route to take so that we can see our stakeholders happy, not only students. The parents who pay for the education, the market who takes our students as employees. So quality has to be a perfect square, dealt in terms of a balanced scorecard approach, where there is understanding of learning, finance, markets, etc. And there is a thorough, holistic approach towards giving a shape or a worthwhile meaning to the concept of quality. That needs to be redefined, because we sometimes move from our focus and we either become a very core research institution or a very core teaching institution, or sometimes we are in the middle of both, ending up with a lot of administration. So I think that should be identified first. That's my take on this. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, madam.
So quality is in terms of the outcomes that you produce,
Yes.
which are benchmarked with others, right? With the expectations of others, right? So your parents have an expectation when they send students to you, so you have to meet that expectation, and oftentimes high quality schools exceed those expectations, or at least strive to.
Yes, madam. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, where we got
Yeah. Madam, this is Dr. Girish Vayam from Siddhaganga Institute of Technology, Tumakuru, Karnataka. Madam, this high quality education should aim at reskilling and upskilling.
Okay.
And another one,
which is quintessential as far as this high quality education is concerned is genuine research, madam, without compromising the quality. Thank you.
Okay, so similar to what he was saying about you have to be training people for the future, so not just skilling, but upskilling and reskilling, right? So that's with that future mindset.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. So the high quality education is time-bound concept, according to me.
Time what?
Time-bound.
Time-bound.
So whatever used to be high quality couple of decades back may not be now, or maybe different in next couple of decades. The most important element, according to me, is the contemporary. There has to be contemporary. And again, there are many dimensions of high quality that includes research, industry, and so many other things.
Yeah. So continuous improvement?
Continuous improvement.
Right.
Hello. Ma'am here. Yes. All the good points has been given are...
You'll have to introduce yourself first.
Yes. Myself Neha Dikshit. I am from Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Petroleum Technology and I am a senior research fellow over there. All the good points has been included by our faculties and seniors. But just I would like to add that purpose of education is not only upskilling or just making impact. It's just about also making a human, a conscious human. Means it's all about it not only impacting a life of just about the career, just a holistic, as one of our faculty have said, that it's a holistic approach. So it's going to make a better human, make conscious human, and it is going to be seen in every aspect of life. So according to me, the high quality education not only covers a good career as well as making an impact, but also make a human a more conscious human.
Yeah. Right. Perfect. Oh yes. We'll just take. Oh, all right, Professor. You wanted to. Could we allow him?
He's got the mic right now.
Please. You have the mic, so you have to say it.
This is Rajesh Jain, Professor Rajesh Jain from IIM Ranchi. Some of the points have been covered, but still I would focus on three important dimensions as far as the theme of the conference is deglobalization. So, first is the transition from a local to a global world, because every manager who comes out of a business school will definitely be operating, or the the team that he will be handling, it will be the global. So sensitive to the diversity, cultures, and all dimensions of the global, that orientation in any business school have to be taught. Second, the movement from the shareholder-centric value maximizing principle dominated by the principles of economics, they have to move to the stakeholder orientation, which the weakest stakeholder is the planet and the weaker people, so everything ESG and everything have to be covered. Third, we teach something which prepares them for what is known, certain. People are operating in a nighty and uncertain world where future is neither known nor it is knowable. So we have to prepare them to understand those types of contingency, and agility and amoeba concept and everything have to be incorporated, so the people are ready for something, because if COVID has come, it has disrupted everything. So we have to prepare the future manager for such type of eventuality. So global orientation, stakeholder orientation, and preparedness for a world where future is neither known nor it is knowable. For me, this is something, three important ingredients of a quality education.
You're basically talking about lifelong learning and continuous improvement. So we could just take one more.
Good morning. Hi, this is Dr. Poonam Kumar from Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur. I mean, enough has been said. I would like to just, in a way, compile it. And I'm using the word knowledge sharing in form of high quality. So one of the terms which I'm using, which generally we speak at IIM Sambalpur, the three words and three I's we always bang on. So shall I stand and just say? So the first I we always use, we talk about this with innovation. So as Dr. Deepak sir has already said, that this is a time-bound thing. So we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's really important. Change is evident, and we need to be prepared for this, for a high-quality education. The second I we generally bang on is what is inclusivity. So when I'm saying again inclusivity, bringing your societal education, inclusivity with all the stakeholders together, and how to compile them with the compliance orientation, that is also the second important integration. Third is, let's not forget, I think nobody has spoken about it, and that is integrity. And when I'm saying integrity, that has to have an ethics-bound teaching, knowledge sharing, which would come as in high-quality education. And when we are with this, we are in this journey. Thank you so much.
Hi, ma'am. Here.
One more, okay.
Yes, my name is Arul Sindel. I represent Jansen School of Business, Coimbatore. So what I feel like holistic development to the students, we have to the stakeholders, we have to provide. And second is the research which should be connected to the industry, and there should be an implication from the research so that the industry can, apply it. So that should be the, it contributes to the higher education. And if we could able to add value to the stakeholders by adding value, in terms of, Madam has said, like integrity, I think that will help the entire community. Thank you.
Good. Take the last one here, Amy.
Yep, last one. Okay.
For me, apart from this, additional practical and experiential learning with creativity.
Okay.
That's a great.
Now, I want to just, as we're just, I'm sure there's lots more ideas, and we could probably go on all day kind of defining these things, but as you think about how each of you have defined quality, I don't think anybody gave, there's no such thing as a wrong answer, but I didn't hear anything that I would say, oh, that's not quality, right? We want to maximize profits, right? We didn't hear that. So if you think about what each of you said, is there one institution in the world that can do all of these things? All of these things in the ways that you have said? No. There's a variety. There are different ways of achieving all of these different things. And some schools will focus on high quality research, which impacts theory. Some schools will focus on high quality research that impacts practice. Some schools will focus on holistic development. Some schools will focus on skills and other kinds of hard skills development. Some will have different approaches to doing both, right? And that's what we talk about when we say high quality, and the gentleman over here talked about benchmarking. Now, when benchmarking, do you benchmark with the local environment? Do you benchmark with the regional environment? Do you benchmark with the international environment? Depends on who your stakeholders are. So you will have an impact that has a different focus depending on who you are as an institution. So high quality cannot be defined for every school in exactly the same way. So that's the point we're trying to make with this, is there's great ideas here, and every school will pick up on some of these. And some schools will be better at doing some than others. Different talents, different inputs create similar quality outputs.
So like everybody talked about what we wanted to say, so you don't need us to reiterate what high quality education is. So all of this basically has become very student centered, which you all are talking about. When we talk about continuous improvement, or when we are talking about lifelong learning, most of you all talked about lifelong learning actually, where you don't know the future, what lies ahead, and what are the other skills that you need to, you need to upskill or reskill yourself. So I think we are pretty much clear on high quality education. We can move on.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just to get you thinking, and then I want to bring it back to AACSB, which is where I come from. So we're all in the business education, and AACSB is the world's oldest association for business education in the world. You can see we were started in 1917. At this point in time, there were 16 schools in the US that got together and said, we need professional managers. The world, the industrial revolution is happening. We need professional managers. And so we need to set about a definition of what high quality professional management education looks like. And that started in 1917, and this was when AACSB was the American Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business. So we're only for the US, we're defining a very small, our benchmarks, for example, are a very small set of 16 schools. Now, the revision in 1969 came about because at this point, just being a professional school wasn't really valued. The market needed more quantitative approaches, so that we implemented standards that had minimum GPA scores, minimum GMAT scores. We implemented a lot of very specific quantitative measures of quality because we felt that the business disciplines needed to be elevated in the academy. Business needed a place, management needed a place in the academy, and it could only do that if it had rigor. So rigor was a big part of that. And we introduced institutional accreditation because we thought it needed to be rigor across the institution, not just in the teaching and learning and research, but in the institution itself as its processes. So in 1991, and this is what we've just kind of did an exercise on, AACSB introduced mission-driven accreditation. Because we said, it is not the what as much as what it means as an institution. What are the unique characteristics of your institution and who are you trying to impact? This mission-driven approach looked at what are the kinds of things that your school is intending to do that is unique to do. And what that did is it actually allowed for different models of quality. So in 1997, the first school outside of North America was accredited, and that's ASEC. And ASEC, believe it or not, started in 1907. So they had been doing business education for a long time, 90 years by the time they got accredited. That doesn't mean that they only became quality when they got AACSB accreditation in 1997. It just means that we hadn't recognized all these different models of quality until we had changed to a mission-driven accreditation approach. And then we go on to introduce quality processes focused on outcomes over inputs. And that's what you see in the 2003, where we went to assurance of learning. We're going to talk a little bit about assurance of learning. You have a similar concept here in India called outcome-based education. But it's the idea that it's not just lecturing in front of students and that's going to impart education. It's ensuring that they actually learn. And this is, AACSB is a pioneer in introducing this in 2003. It was a very new concept. But the standards were revised to really look at high quality processes in strategic planning and in this assurance of learning. And then the gentleman over here mentioned it, but in 2013, we moved towards this concept of high quality business education includes, at a very general level, but key components of innovation, impact, and engagement. These are the pillars of AACSB in 2013 standards revision, and you can see the revisions are getting a little bit more one right after the other because the world is changing fast and we have to have continuous improvement. So the reason why I'm putting this history out to you is because it is an evolving process. It's been over 100 years. We've been working on this problem of what is high quality education in business. And being an advocate for business is really important in that process, and it's the collective that brings that to the forefront. In 2020, we introduced more of a principles-based approach, which means exactly what the gentleman over there said. We don't know what the future looks like. In principle, if you have these components, engagement, innovation, impact, assurance of learning, high quality, impactful research, you know what? What your mission says and what you do, how you get there, we're going to allow you a lot of flexibility, even more flexibility to do that. It has to be peer-driven. It has to be outcome-focused because we don't have prescriptive parameters because we don't know what the world looks like, right? We know what it looks like today, but if you're planning for the future, you might invent a new process tomorrow, and that might be good enough. We can't tell you what that looks like. So we moved to that, and this is where societal impact came in as well. And this came from all of our constituents. We went around the world. We had 16 people that went around the world in various forums talking to everyone and said, what should the standards be about? And they said, we need to hold ourselves accountable for societal impact. We want a standard on societal impact. And that's where you see societal impact come in there. All of these revisions have come from business schools, government. AACSB is not a government organization. It does not follow necessarily what the government requires us to do because we're an international organization. We follow what our accreditation council tells us to do, and those are accredited schools. So there are 1,000 accredited schools. Those are the ones who vote on the standards. They're the ones that decide the standards and what goes into the standards. So if you're at an AACSB accredited school, you get a vote on the next standards revisions and what goes into that.
And then we have the National Accreditation and Ranking Framework, which everybody is aware of. The National Assessment and Accreditation Council, NAC, that accredits you at the institutional level, then National Board of Accreditation, which is for program level accreditation, and the National Institutional Ranking Framework, which I think everybody is aware of, NIRF. And we are going to talk about how each of these relate with AACSB and how we can make all of it work, like Amy initially suggested, that how to reduce the burden, because I think those who are part of accreditation would understand the pressure that it gets you. So it's better that we talk about it now, that how could we streamline. That's the whole purpose of the talk over here. So we'll move on.
Yeah, and I think I've just been through that history. These are relatively new. These systems haven't been around as long as the AACSB has been around, right? These are relatively new concepts and new systems brought to to this environment, and they are also evolving. So one of the reasons why is AACSB works with all of these different organizations around the world, which are national accrediting organizations in various forums. And I've broken these out into buckets into sort of how we work with them. In some places we do joint visits with the national accreditation, so there's a synergy between the visit. In some places like in Germany and in China, a school can opt into a joint visit. They don't have to have it. In the Netherlands, you have to have this joint visit, and we work with them on that. We also have places where there are sort of exemptions given for schools. If you have AACSB accreditation, you're exempted from certain things or waivers of certain things in your national system. And here in India, AIU will take AACSB when giving PGDM equivalents of MBA. If you have AACSB, you don't need to have another accreditation. And so there are ways that we're working with organizations. Other ways are the reporting. The reporting is a lot of work. And sometimes it's just a matter of swapping labels. And we'll talk about some of that here today. That's not value add. We recognize that at AACSB. We want to make sure that the principles of our accreditation are achieved. But if you're already doing the same work, you don't need to replicate the same work just to check the box. You need to make sure that the work is done from the principle of the work. And so sometimes it's just a matter of accepting reports from other organizations. So we won't have a discussion about this, but I propose this to you as owners of business education in India, who have to do these compliance work, who have to do the regulatory work, who are interested in being part of an international community and interested in potentially doing AACSB. How do you think that we could work with the national systems here to improve and increase the benefit of doing both for you? So that's just something, and I'll give you my contact if you want to discuss with me on this. At another time we can. But that's something to think about. So there's a couple assumptions. I'm just going to leave these out here. We will not be debating which is a better system than the other. We recognize that all of the systems that you have, and when I was looking through MBA and I was looking through NIRF and NAC, they're very well intended. There's a reason why they're making these requirements. There is a reason. Now, whether they produce the outcome as expected is a different story, but they're well intended. So any accreditation, any ranking framework is well intended but not perfect. And there's always room for improvement at AACSB, there's always room for improvement elsewhere. You do what you have to do. You do what you need to do in your own environment. And of course, I'm just going to stick this out here because there are certain affiliated schools and constituent colleges that are covered under the national system here that aren't actually eligible for AACSB because they don't have curriculum autonomy. It just means it's impossible for you to meet the AACSB standards if you don't have the ability to make those changes that are required. So I'll just put that out here because that's, if any of you are in schools like that, and I know that the NEP is doing away with or working towards eliminating the affiliated system. If any of you are at schools like that, it just means you're not eligible currently for AACSB, but at any point in time where you have curriculum autonomy, you may be eligible for AACSB.
So we'll begin with the question, what is accreditation? I mean, I could just take one or two responses if you would like to share your views on what is accreditation. Anybody who would like to? Confirming the quality. Okay. Any other statement? Standardization. All right. So before we understand what is accreditation, it's important to understand what it is not. And this I say because of the experience that I personally have and from Indian context as well, that how we tend to, I mean, it's important that we talk about these gaps or these challenges that we face, that how we tend to think of it as a prize to be won, or a tick box exercise, or something which is the responsibility only of the accreditation office or the person who has been assigned with this particular task. I'm sure those who have actually dipped their fingers, they would understand the pain that they have to go through. And probably it's not the responsibility of the top management alone because they decided to go the accreditation path. It's definitely not a periodic exercise that begins when you're just 6 months away from your accreditation, be it a 3-year or a 5-year exercise. And we all tend to do that. I mean, even if we say that we do not, we all have this particular thing which we need to overcome. And I think collaboration is one way of overcoming this and continuously trying to involve everybody into the process. It's not a platform or an opportunity to brag about your achievements. And it's definitely not a rat race, which I think most of us have been doing this, and we need to move away from this particular concept. And we'll move ahead, so we'll discuss what it is. It's definitely an exercise because this personally, I am pretty excited and passionate about accreditation, quality assurance and continuous improvement. I was pretty lucky to get into this particular area and know more about it. And I talk about it that let's not talk about what it is not. Let's take it as an exercise where you see what your strengths are, what are the areas of improvement, what are the gaps, and what are the opportunities that you can actually tap with it. And definitely it's a story to, it's an opportunity to narrate your story. So this is my personal analogy that I usually use. How do you see your institution? Do you see your institution as an enchanted forest? Or do you see it as a, national park or something? Now, when just by the sound of it, enchanted forest is pretty mesmerizing and it is pretty attractive and it's pretty fancy. But would you want your institution to be an enchanted forest where amazing things are happening at various places, but people don't know why that is happening? Or do you want it to be a national park where things are happening organically, but you are aware, you have a bird's eye view, you know where the gaps are, you know how many species need your help, or what sort of help do you need to make it into an organic system to grow. So I think this is what I feel that accreditation does. We all suffer from this, that our institutions are doing great work, but it happens in silos. It happens in parts where you're not able to tell the story completely. And then it becomes the burden of the accreditation professor, faculty, or the staff members who are assigned with this particular task to tell the story. So it's important that everybody comes together and takes it as a collective exercise and not see accreditation just as something to achieve. When you start taking the areas of improvement or the things that you can actually take to make your own processes better, that is when accreditation will actually work for you. And that's what has been happening. We at XLRI, we did start off with what it is not, obviously. I think everybody in India, for us, it was a very novel idea initially when we all started. But then eventually you will put yourself into that path that, no, I don't want to run in that rat race, or I don't want it to be a tick box exercise. What is it actually telling me? Probably what people are not talking, because your faculties are too busy, their plates are full, they have to do teaching, research, and then on top of that we burden them with the administrative duties. So it becomes all the more important that everybody should come together, the same consensus. So it took us, I would say, 6 to 7 years to have it institutionalized, especially the assurance of learning. Initially, we did do it as, as a tick box exercise that, oh my God, we need to reach the first assessment cycle, we need to finish the second assessment cycle. But then we realized that the most important challenge we had was that the task was only interested onto the faculty who were responsible for it, or the associate dean or convener who is actually taking care of it. But then when I talk about institutionalizing it, it was important that we chase the faculty. Sorry, that's what we have to do when you're an assurance of learning expert. Have a one-off, one-to-one interaction. And the most important thing is that you become a go-to department or a go-to person. Because it's not that they don't want to do it. The faculty, the buy-in from the faculty, we don't receive it, mainly because it's an unknown territory, they don't know about it, and they think, why should I bother with it? I would like to avoid it as long as I can. But then when you showcase yourself that you are the go-to person, you will handhold, as a department or office, then the buy-in starts coming in. So now I can very proudly say that all of our faculty have been dipped into the assurance of learning process, and no one's scared. So it has come to this level that if I greet a professor while having a walk or something, so even before we would exchange greetings, he would be like, I'm going to send you the report tomorrow. So it has come to that level. So it's on their mind all the time, and they're not scared for it. They know that if they get stuck or they have a doubt, they could easily reach out to a department or a person who would definitely help them. So one time dipping, I think, is required. Once that happens, it becomes a cakewalk, and then you're able to talk that language as well. So it's a way of involving holistically to achieve your mission and vision that you're headed to. What does accreditation communicate? So it definitely, if you have NBA accreditation or ACSB or EQUIS or AMBA for that matter, all of these talk about that you are committed to high quality program. You don't have to talk about it separately. Somebody knows that, all right, I am Ranchi, it is ACSB accredited, or it is AMBA accredited, or EQUIS accredited. You automatically get the mark. Because I think when we talk about internationalization or at global platform, people tend to get confused with so many IIMs. They don't understand what is IIM Ahmedabad, or what is IIM Ranchi, or what is IIM Bangalore, or what is XLRI for that matter. But when they know, oh, it's an ACSB accredited institute, the change of thought process or the perspective is absolutely different. I would like to give an example. Recently that I was chatting with one of our scholars who has finished her thesis, and she was applying abroad. And when she applied in universities in US, her degree, or the PhD degree, which is a fellow program that we offer, was actually considered as a regional degree. And her CV did get traction for that. And she met me and she's like, I did not know that ACSB has this kind of leverage that we are gaining, which we don't realize it. And our scholars would want to probably go for postdoc or for furthering their research ideas for collaboration and maybe come back or whatever. But when they go out in the international market, these accreditations actually help you. So you don't need to talk about, you don't need to go out into the global field to talk about it. The accreditation does that for you. It talks about that how you are making sure that your curriculum is relevant, your learning journey for the student is student-centered, that you are definitely, committed towards societal impact, creating those kind of individuals, sensitizing them towards, societal impact. The quality of highest caliber faculty you have, and you have learning edge, obviously innovative courses, you have innovation in your teaching, and obviously continuous improvement. So you don't have to talk about it yourself. Your accreditation does that for you. So we've talked about this actually, outcome-focused education.
So this is just to sort of kind of orient what people were mentioning. So there is this shift, and we've seen it around in accreditations around the world. What was input focus, so how many faculty to students do you have, right? That's an input measure. Looking at inputs, but it's not how many faculty to students, it's what do you do with those faculty and those students to change and create an outcome, right? So you were talking about changing mindsets, changing other things. So in this shift, there's been this move from, yes, inputs are important. You need a conducive environment for learning, so you need a building, perhaps. But that building might be configured differently depending on your school, right? So when we start to talk about outputs. So a research, a PRJ, an article, that's an output. You had your inputs, you had your output, that's your article. That is an early indicator of a potential impact. It in and of itself is not an impact. An impact is how that gets used. So is that article used to change something, to change the mindset? Is that teaching used to change the mindset? Is it used, how are the uses of things are impacts? And these tend to be long-term. They tend to be over a very wide horizon, time horizon. So how are your faculty influencing public policy? How are what are the career opportunities your students are getting, not just in their placement cycle, but 10 years down the line? How employable are they then? Have you instilled those mindsets that you hope to instill at that point? So these are some of the things. Outcomes are difficult to measure. They're messy. We don't tell you what kinds of outcomes you have to have. But your focus, your goals, should be set up so that you can see those outcomes eventually. And put your inputs that you have to work to achieve those outcomes. So that's the shift that we've seen across accreditations around the world. It's what AACSB has been moving into for the last 20 or so years. And we're seeing it even here to an extent in the higher education system here.
In fact, if you look at the boards that we first started with, high quality education, all these are outcomes. That's what we want our students to achieve. Now, obviously, like Amy has been talking about the shift that has happened, what must you do to obtain your degree, to what can you do now that you have obtained your degree? So I would like to talk about how it actually began. So probably around in mid-1980s, there was this assessment movement that began, where government gives fundings to the public higher education institutions. So they wanted to understand what is the impact of these funds that we are giving to these higher education. What are the graduates learning by the end of the period, end of the session, or end of the course, or end of the program, which actually led to that kind of approach, which was not teacher-centered, but it moved to a very student-centered approach, where you wanted to know what your graduates are able to know and do by the end of the program, not what you want them to teach and how much have they absorbed. So initially we did have that sort of system where you would want to know how much have the teaching material been absorbed by the students, but now it has moved on to the competencies that develop, the learning outcomes that needs to be achieved, that the student should know and be able to do, or the skills that they need to have so that their employability increases, by the end of the program that you are offering. So, yeah. So the NEP also talks about it, the National Education Policy 2020. It emphasizes on the learning outcomes. They want to emphasize on this fact, they want to emphasize on the fact that there has to be a holistic development. Now, when we talk about holistic development, we don't just want classroom teaching. I'm sure all the institutes who are striving for excellence, including IIM Ranchi, are trying to make their program very holistic. So you don't just have classroom teaching. I'm sure you have projects, you have assignments, you send them out, you have some immersion program, like in XRI we have, at the very beginning of the program, we have a rural immersion program where we send out the students. It's a compulsory mandatory program where they're sent out to villages for 2 days, and they stay there, live with the villages, and it is a MOU. We have signed it with the CSR side of Tata Steel, where they are the ones who give the problem statement to the students. So it's not just a fun visit to the village, let me go and see how people are living their lives, but there are real problem statements that are given out to the students. They're supposed to work with the villages for those 2 days. Apart from just handling that particular problem statement and finding the solution, which their mindset is at that particular mind to just quickly reach the solution, they are getting this experience of living a rural life, and some of them probably do not have that experience at all. This sensitization happens for societal needs as well. Something which we take for granted, like a toothpaste and a brush. Oh my God, it's pretty handy in a bathroom. But do they have it? No, they don't. What do they use? Maybe they use datun, as we call it. So, learning their indigenous ways as well, which actually helps in when we, when they get into the classroom and where we teach a core course on sustainability and ethics, they're able to relate it. So, another example I would like to give is, in fact, Professor Kalyan Bhaskar was here talking about societal impact yesterday. So, what he does in his, one of his courses, I think public policy, he takes the entire batch to a nearby village, which is again maintained by one of our alums, and the classroom is conducted under the tree. So, and he strategically plans it at the time when there is harvesting time or something, so that they can help see, and he just wants to give them that experience. So public policy or sustainability you cannot learn in just a classroom. You've got to go out, experience and know it, and that probably stays. That will create that holistic development that we are talking about, that NEP is also talking about, the government is also talking about, a comprehensive approach for quality learning. It should show in your curriculum, it should show in the pedagogy, and also the way you're assessing your students as well. Are you just assessing them through MCQs, or are you giving them some innovative assessments? So for example, again I would like to give an example. One of our professors who is an OB professor but very enthusiastic and passionate about AI, so Professor Shiva Kakkar, you should probably follow him on LinkedIn if you really want to update yourself with AI news and what's happening. So he applies a lot of AI techniques into his classroom, into the way he would like to assess. And while the world is talking about how ChatGPT and AI is taking away the, it's helping the students to plagiarize and get into unethical practices, he talks about ways how you can actually use this. This is technological, using the technology and integrating it into your system and integrating it into your assessment and your pedagogy and your curriculum. So, and obviously NEP is also talking about internationalization, where we are hopefully looking at students outside of India looking at India as a land for gaining education, like it was thousands of years ago. We've lost that, but I think with this, we are definitely wanting to become the hub for higher education, where people should want to come to India for gaining education. So hopefully if all we work together, we will be able to reach that goal as well.
Yeah, so we thought we'd wake you up a little bit because we've been talking for a while. But wanted to we talked about a few things. And I just want to get maybe one response. We've got 3 questions here, one response on each of these. So we'll start with this one. So we've talked about outcome-based education here in India. So whether you're AICSB accredited or not, you're probably doing this to some extent. But how do you assess student learning outcomes? I think I said student outcomes, so I guess you could also apply this to graduate outcomes as well.
Thank you, ma'am. I did introduce myself earlier. Once again, Professor Monodip Raichaudhuri of St. Xavier's University, Kolkata. Now, the first step to assess learning of our learning ability or the level of learning from our students is the internship. When they go for the summer internship during the months of June and July in the MBA program, we first try to find out by direct communication with the expert in the industry under whom they work and the faculty member here in the university. We exchange words and communicate together to find out how much of transfer of learning has been done in the workplace. So whatever specialization they have been into, how much of transfer are they going through? This is one. And number two is, when we put our students for the final placements, the question is, are you groomed for an interview? So it's not about mugging up knowledge. So there we try to have workshops and special sessions where we ensure that the students are equipped to face an interview, which is not just about knowledge but about presentability and talking about oneself and kind of showcasing yourself in front of the person who's on the other side of the dais. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so you're using third-party feedback to assess whether or not you have achieved the expectations of the consumers of your students, right? Not say consumers, but those who are going to use what you have produced and what you have helped produce in the student. So that's a good example. That's difficult in some ways to do and then feed it back into your curriculum. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in very simple language, what we do at ISB, so we have got different programs. Each program has got certain learning objectives. And then there are set of courses which are taught in a program. So each course got to have at least one objective which has been set at a program level. And then there is a measurement where we actually measure. We said this will be the course learning objectives. There are 4 of them, but one of them is common at a school level, program level. And we say, is it really measured? And there is a feedback system from students. Have they learned it, not learned it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's an assurance of learning systems. That's excellent. That's a system which takes time. As she said, what, 6-7 years it took you guys to implement it effectively. I think some schools managed to do it in a little bit less time. But it does require everybody to buy in to what is being taught. So you mentioned faculty. Not all faculty are easily bought into this, partially because they're protective of their course. One of the things at ACSB, we talk about program level assurance of learning. And one of the major reasons behind that is because everybody can get behind what the program outcomes are, right? It's less about what they teach and how they teach, and more about how as a system you've set it up so that it contributes to those outcomes of your students as a collective. It's less about the judgment of the faculty, more about, is this curriculum designed in such a way that we're achieving the outcomes, the expected outcomes, and we hear from our recruiters what those outcomes are. I'm just going to move to the next, oops, did I do that? So, how many of you have a strategic plan at your institution? Nobody has a strategic plan? Dr. Mitra, you have a strategic plan. You have a strategic plan, okay.
3-year, 5-year, 15-year.
Okay.
Awareness. We want everybody within the school, right from staff to faculty, to know about what's our long-term plan is, let's say next 5 years.
I think that's an excellent point, because this is what we all suffer. If you pick anybody and ask them what the vision of your school is, any staff or any faculty, they would fumble. So what are the measures we take that they understand really, not just in words, not just mugging up that statement or the mission or the vision. You really need to understand that what is our mission? Like, for example, in XLRI, it is creating global leaders, lifelong learners, who have sensitization towards sustainability and society. So you need to understand it in your own words, which is the most important. Like, having a strategic plan is one thing, but then making sure that everybody is in sync with it and knows.
So everybody has to be in sync. And one of those is these are the outcomes that are driving your school forward. As you said, what's happening in the next 5 years? At AACSB, one of our strategic goals is reducing the accreditation burden on our schools. So when it came time to come up with a topic, I was like, this is something we're working on around the globe. I want to advance this in India. I know what they're doing. I know how it applies to what's happening here. So as you work on your individual disciplines, as you work in your individual areas, on your projects that you are passionate about, you will know how the institution is trying to drive something forward. A big one right now is moving practice forward. Having thought leadership at your institution, which is moving practice forward. So do you have a center of excellence? How many of you at work at a school that has a center of excellence? Few here? What's one of your centers of excellence?
See, earlier we used to call centers of excellence, but now we have renamed it. This is the centers only.
Centers,
so the
okay.
excellence has been removed because it is very difficult to justify what is excellence and
Sure,
what is not
sure.
excellence.
Okay.
Anyway, we have 3 centers: Happiness, Birsa Munda Center, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center for Good Governance.
Okay, so Center for Happiness, for example. And your institution is probably funding that center to an extent?
Yes, some extent.
To some extent, you're providing funds. You probably also have some targets for how you're going to work on certain projects for that center, because you believe that that center is related to something the institution, and I would say, I think centers is in your strategic plan. I'm not sure if the specific one, but making sure that you have places where you can drive things forward at the institutional level, and everybody knows what they're trying to achieve with the center. That's a very common way strategic plans are driving outcomes. Yeah.
I just wanted to say one line. We have a center called Father Lafo Center for Excellence in Research and Innovation. Now this center takes up projects. Projects like currently we are working on, we are located in a place called Newtown, which is very close to the airport in Kolkata. So we have taken up a project, a group of faculty members, to develop, rethink about Newtown. Like I'm heading the library part of Newtown. So we faculty members, along with students, we are taking up these developmental projects as a part of the center activities.
So centers are a vehicle in some ways, and many schools will have as part of their strategic plan that we're going to fund, or we're going to have so many centers, or we might grow to another level of centers. Now, remember I'm talking about outcomes. What is a center? Is a center an outcome? So it could be an output. Creating a center is an output. But the outcome is what the center does. I am seeing way too many schools saying we're going to create a lot of different centers, we've got a lot of ideas. Your mission guides what you invest in as a school. So it's not the number of centers, it's the outcomes of those centers. And this is true about the other things that you are doing as an institution. So when you think about driving a strategic plan forward for your institution, and you think about these things, it's not just creating another center, it's creating a center that's going to do something that helps your school achieve a future outcome that you desire. So that's just something to think about. And I won't get into this one too much, but your PhD scholars are here. We talk about at ISDSI thought leadership. There's an entire standard on impact of scholarship that has a component on thought leadership. And we expect all institutions understand where they influence with their thought leadership, right? So this is when a business school is highly recognized in a certain area, and so happiness, for example, might be an area where you're investing in scholarship in that area, because you expect that the next time the Times calls and wants to talk to your institution, they've actually called you because you're the expert on happiness, right? So this is what thought leadership is about at institutions, and what that does is it draws other scholars to you. It creates an ecosystem of greater impact. So ASDSB wants to see not just PRJ outputs, we want to see initiatives which drive thought leadership. recognition from external parties that you are an expert in a certain area of influence. In some places, we talk about, in Lebanon, for example, there's a school where thought leadership is business in conflict areas. So they do research on business and conflict areas, and they advise the UN on research in conflict areas, because they are uniquely positioned where they sit to be able to be the world's expert on that subject. So that's what another thing that ASDSB looks at in terms of not just what are your outputs, but what are your outcomes. Okay, so we're gonna move on, and this is where it gets kind of technical. But what I want you to be able to see a little bit is that there is some overlap between these systems, and that you can use this overlap. And Shika is gonna talk about, we're gonna focus on assurance of learning with NBA, because this is a very big overlap area. But go ahead.
Right. So I have had the opportunity of being part of the accreditation for NBA as well as ACSB and other international accreditation. And I'm going to talk about the, eventually, I mean, after we finished ACSB, we took NBA as a different project altogether. We did not have time to see the similarities, but then we managed to put something together just because we would like to remove or lessen the burden that we all have, and each cycle is, each cycle has to be done. So the good part is that NBA and Assurance of Learning, which is part of ACSB, they share similar philosophy. And now NEP 2020 is also talking about it, the outcome-based education. So both primarily focus on what the student, the attributes, or what should they be able to do by the end of the program. Both of them are talking about similar thing. The knowledge, skills, and attitude that we want to develop once they go through that particular program. And obviously, assurance of learning with respect to NBA is not very complex. In NBA, in the assessment phase, you have to do a lot of assessments, whereas in assurance of learning, you have flexibility. So NBA, I could say that it's slightly prescriptive. So we can say easily that it's the route is already set for the roadmap that you have to take. And with AOL or ACSB, we can say it's a very flexible GPS system. So, if I have to compare between these two. So, it doesn't matter which route you take if you know what your destination is. But with NBA, it prescribes. Maybe it is required because it's sort of a help that NBA is providing, because we have a plethora of higher education. Not everybody is as great as IIM Ranchi or XLR or other IIMs. There are those who would need hand-holding. So this sort of helps, but there is flexibility in NBA as well. And obviously, when we talk about outcome-based education and AOL, they both have similar philosophy when it comes to continuous improvement or focus on the learning outcomes, what the students need to learn by the end of the program. It's a student-centric model, and everything is around the student, everything, the assessment, the teaching. I mean, it is said that in this particular system, teachers are mere facilitators of creating a learning environment, rather than forcing onto what you really want to teach. You facilitate an environment, and even assessments are those tools which are there to improve and confirm and help you in seeing whether those learning outcomes are being met or not. So you have the flexibility of actually applying various assessment methods. It could be group projects, it could be individual projects, it could be live projects, it could be various others. And obviously stakeholder engagement, which you all do at various levels, getting guest faculty in or adjunct faculty in, organizing events where you have industry experts and letting students go for internships in various industry, and these kind of things, yeah. So now I'm going to talk about very specific from standard perspective, how NBA and AOL relate. So NBA talks about actions that you need to take for continuous improvement in their criterion 10. And assurance of learning does that through, which I think if you have dipped yourself in ACSB, you would be very familiar with the term closing the loop, which is a 5-year cycle that happens at the end. I can see some heads nodding there, so they are aware of this particular term. And the focus is obviously on outcome-based approach, program outcomes. So NBA has program outcomes. They have program educational objectives which relate to the career progression that we want our graduates to have. And that then drills down to program outcomes, which are very similar to program learning outcomes as assurance of learning or ASCSB talks about. Then there is course mapping, obviously, which happens in NBA as well. You have to map your courses with the program outcomes. Which particular courses relate to which outcome or attribute that you want your student to have learned by the end of the program. So one example I would like to give is that we have, a very common one I think everybody has is communication. Then again, communication is a program outcome. If the students go through the program, are they able to speak fluently like Shashi Tharoor? Maybe not. So we've got to define it really at every level, that what does communication actually mean? When you go through an MBA program and when you go through fashion designer program, or when you go through an MBBS program, say for example, should the communication definition be the same? Maybe not. So this is where these standards, they help you in defining each term in the context of that particular program. So it could be that you're able to speak in the context of the financial language you can speak. You're able to interpret or use the jargons which are specific to that particular domain. This is probably the, are you able to interpret? Are you able to present your ideas using the jargons for that particular domain? So it's each to his own. I think both allow you to create your own rubrics, how you want your students to be seen through those program outcomes at different level. How do you define a beginner? How do you think a beginner in your course would be communicating? Or how a student who's competent would be able to communicate? What is your definition of a competent student who's gone through that particular program? Or what is the definition of a highly competent student who will go through your particular program? And then obviously involvement of varieties of tools and methods that allows you. In both the cases, the faculty has that leeway, and feedback and continuous improvement is the key in both the areas as well. Right.
Okay, so when we were taking a look at this, we saw that there's a lot of duplication that happens, and so just wanted to give you some ideas. So in NBA, you're required to have program educational outcomes, and she mentioned you're expected to have course mapping. So course mapping with program outcomes is required in both NBA and AACSB. We call it something different. We call program outcomes as competencies. So you can use your NBA map that you create for AACSB. If you've done your map for NBA and you align what your competencies and program outcomes are, you can use the same map for both with some slight modification. Your choice of assessment for NBA should be measuring your competencies, right? So you have to choose your program outcomes. It should be a competency that you can assess for AACSB. So it has to be generally it comes from your mission. And one of the things that be mindful of is, I think in NBA you're allowed to use marks. For AACSB it's not usual to use marks because marks assess multiple competencies. So when you're thinking about designing for NBA, if you eventually want to do AACSB, think about doing internal assessments. That's allowed in NBA. Internal assessments are allowed, so that's a question from an exam. That's not full marks. You want to choose the question that's assessing the specific competency, because for AACSB we want you to be granular enough that you know what you're assessing, so that you can make improvements if needed. If you're assessing multiple competencies, it's distorted. There's too much noise for you to know what you need to fix. There's also this idea that the choice of attainment level, so NBA allows you to choose your attainment level. This is an example straight out of the manual that you see up there. For AACSB, we also say the same thing. You choose the threshold that you want to set. So what you can do is, if you write your rubrics in such a way that says for AACSB meets expectations is this 60% mark, right? That means that your students have met the expectation and that you are aligned, and the same assessment can be used for both. And both expect indirect assessment. So what you were talking about with internships, both expect that you're doing some form, and there's no prescription on how much in either. You need some, but neither says how much. So if you're doing indirect assessment for MBA, you can apply that for AACSB as well. So this is an example of, Shika pulled this up from her adapted, this isn't exactly from XLRI, but you might, most schools will create something like what you see on the bottom here as a curriculum map for AACSB, and then they create something at the top there that looks like what they do for NBA. And actually, these are kind of telling exactly the same. This is a picture of where you are teaching what in your program that is part of your program expected outcomes, right? So for AACSB, it's just a modification of the NBA map, where for us, you're not assessing necessarily in every course, right? Every course needs to be mapped to a program outcome, right? So what you see here is you see critical thinking is program outcome 1, and for NBA, the school is assessing in a course where they introduce the topic, right? That's that white circle you see up there. And they're assessing for MBA in a course where it is emphasized. That's the green circle that you see up there. For AACSB, they've chosen to take only one of those assessments, because AACSB is concerned with the program outcome. Do you have an outcome the first time you introduce something? Maybe, but is it the program outcome? It's a course outcome, absolutely, right? It's a course outcome because you said, okay, they're going to understand this concept, but it's not a competency that they graduate with. We're concerned with what are the competencies that students graduate with. So for AACSB, you might take a subset, and that's what I'm trying to communicate here. You take a subset of what you do for NBA, for AACSB. If you've mapped it correctly and efficiently, and you've really thought about this, and you've got it down, you can do, what you do for NBA can be applied for AACSB.
Like we were able to use the similar map. This is how we realized that there's a lot of similarity. We were able to use the curriculum map that we had created for AACSB or for AOL into the NBA. The only difference, like I mentioned in the assessment, is where you, for example, if we take teamwork over there, which is the program outcome number 7, all the 3 courses map it as high. H means high, and M is medium, and L is low. So you've got to measure it in all the courses and then take the average as the attainment level. However, if in case of the assurance of learning with respect to AACSB, you could choose to measure teamwork. In a 5-year cycle, you've got to measure it twice. So say I'm in the first cycle, so I would just choose the course 301 to measure the teamwork. That's the only difference here I could say that there is. So in terms of assessment, it's flexible and it allows you a little bit of a breather as well.
Yeah, I think this is more of, you can kind of look at what the expectation is, because we're very program focused in AACSB. Very, very program focused, because we actually believe that most schools have governing processes to deal with course level outcomes. Most governments require that. In the US, they do require that there is some course level governance that happens at an institution. We're not monitoring course level governance. We're monitoring program outcomes at AACSB. But in order to do both, if you align them, you can do them together in the way that we're showing. So that's kind of the idea. You don't need to have 2 different systems. That is an extra work that isn't necessary. So in order to align, your PEO statements can identify your competency goals. So for example, our program provides students with financial theory, right, and analytical capability. They're responsible managers when they go out into organizations. They could be a PEO. That's identified your competencies, right? Critical thinking, financial literacy, whatever those competencies are, responsible management, leadership, could all be part of your competency
Like
goals.
holding managerial, high managerial position at
Right.
global level.
So then, once you've identified your competencies, you write your program outcomes, right? And I've just given you what some of those are. And then what we say is, in order to operationalize those so that you can put them into that curriculum map we just showed you, defining learning outcomes. And the gentleman from ISB mentioned how they do it. You can have, at the course level, several course outcomes that you decide as faculty. And one of those is an identified learning outcome mapped to a program outcome, right? So if you break down your program outcomes into learning objectives, faculty have the ability to choose one of those and say, okay, this is what is covered in my course. I'm making sure that ethical leadership is something that we're working on in my course, and that's been defined as a learning objective, right? So it allows you to be granular enough. They're optional within ACSB. I advocate for them, especially when you have a national system that requires course objectives. So that's just something that you can think about as you're doing this so that you can get over that hurdle of rejection in trying to do this system. So for the AOL process, this is what we call closing the loop. Yeah. Sorry, what? PEO, Program Educational. So this is just defining what the program should be able to do in terms of career alignment. So that's the expectation. It's a written statement. It has to be mapped to your mission, generally. So you offer an MBA that trains responsible managers, for example. That would be a program. And it can have lots of different competencies within a program educational statement. This is what MBA requires.
So like program educational objectives, they stem from your mission and vision, and they basically focus on the career progression of how you want your graduates to do in their career. Basically, that's what it talks about. And then it seeps down to your program outcomes, which are specific knowledge, skills, and values that you want the students to have, which relate to program learning outcomes of assurance of learning, or ACSB as well.
Yeah, sure.
Just wanted to say that this one looks fine, but if you look at, for example, the first item, may not be contemporary. If you look at the speed at which things are changing in the world and the need for innovation. So when you say PEO statements can identify competency goals aligned to career objectives. So if you look at in India, you go to the top technical institutions delivering mechanical engineering degree, the guy may not, his career objectives may be different. He may actually, be doing something which got nothing to do with that 4 years of education, because he takes that 4 years of education more for, learning a few things, which is learning how to learn, may not be what has been defined as a program objectives or even course objectives. As I said, this is fine, but I get a feeling maybe we need to review.
I would say that if you're doing check the box work for NBA, right, and many schools are doing check the box work, it's a compliance requirement. If you're doing check the box work and you've written a program educational outcome statement that is really just kind of meeting the mark, you've probably not done what you need to do for ACSB. My point is that if you do that work for NBA from the start, what you do for ACSB becomes easier. So the idea is that you would write your program educational outcome statements in a way so that they can identify competencies. So we are talking about what all of those competencies might be here, right? Those are high quality competencies. What are those competencies that you expect your students to be able to have that's written in your mission? And if it's not in your mission, maybe it should be. Maybe you need to change your mission. These are the things, the conversations that you would have as you work through this. So you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean that the PEOs will satisfy your competencies. It means that you can have that system work for you. There can be overlap. So for ACSB, basically the first half of this loop can be satisfied from both, doing both. Where it comes into the challenge is the calculation method that's prescribed in NBA. So the calculation method that is prescribed of NBA is a little bit different. So you probably will need to calculate and analyze the data separately. Just make sure you feed it back in so it closes the loop for both. So you're on that same cycle. That's kind of the key. So I won't get into this too much, but one of the things that ASDSB provides, because this is a complicated process, is stuff like this. Right. Interaction, engagement. We want to make sure that you're not just doing busy work, you're doing meaningful work.
So it would be nice if I say it, because it should come from the horse's mouth who's experienced it. So with ACSB, I have experienced that there's a community. All those who have registered themselves on the ACSB website, you can become part of certain communities where you can share knowledge and ask questions and get responses, and also gain knowledge on how things work in different parts of the world, and how probably that could also give us insights on how Indian B schools are different from Western B schools, and we can actually, have, our opinions being put forth so that ACSB could, and they are already in fact, aligning the standards as per Indian B schools, and not just bringing something which is a Western approach or something. Probably it must have happened in the beginning, but it's not happening now. So that ACSB community really helps you to be updated as well what's happening. That's one platform that allows you to ask any question without feeling, should I do that or not, which probably our B schools lack. I would be very frank here, that we feel that if we ask a question, we would be looked down upon. We don't have that environment where we allow people to ask as many questions as you want, and it's okay to ask a very basic question as well, which is the very reason why we don't get buy-in from faculty in the first place. I'll be very, very honest here. So, apart from that, yes, I've personally gone through a lot of workshops that they continuously recommend and benefited from it, because the cohort in that is from different countries as well. So you understand how things are working in Thailand, why it is important, because it also gives you insights on how can you collaborate with them. Eventually, that's the whole purpose. If you are aligning yourself with NEP 2020, then you've got to have internationalization in your DNA. And how can that happen? When you put yourself in there, and directly going in there and collaborating with someone because somebody recommended isn't the right recipe for having collaboration. It's eventually not going to, it's just going to be an MOU with a file sitting inside your cupboard, to be honest. So it's very important, what are you doing with that MOU? Most of the collaboration happen with those institutes which you don't have your MOUs, because faculties are working individually with their collaborators. So these kind of opportunities help you to collaborate with the right kind of institution outside. Why look only on the west side, which I've been talking pretty loudly about it. Let's look at Eastern colleges, Asian colleges as well. Can we not excite Asian colleges to come to India? Why do we not have students from Malaysia, Nepal, Thailand, Bangladesh? Why don't we have that? Why are we only wanting students from Europe or US for that matter? So any kind of collaboration for that matter. So this allows that, and obviously it lets you know on ways to measure assurance of learning, how to mature it, how to make your assurance of learning system mature. There's I think it's available on ASCSB's website as well. If you want to know whether your assurance of learning process is mature enough or not, you could take up that test, and it lets you know whether your system, where all are you lagging. It lets you out loud, it says the gaps that your assurance of learning system could have, and then you can work towards it. And obviously opens doors to international peers, as I already spoke about. So
yeah. And one of the things with AACSB is if you collaborate, I know we have the academic bank of credits that's coming up, a lot of questions around that. At AACSB, we say that if you're an AACSB accredited school and you collaborate with another AACSB accredited school, then you can accept those credits as quality assured. Right? So you can use the accreditation as an acceptance of quality when you look at accepting credits from other institutions. So okay, so NAC is not all of you are on NAC, I understand that, but NAC is the NEP, and the idea, as I understand it, is there will be at some point a merging of these kind of systems at the national level. So it could be that you don't have NAC now, but you have something similar to that in the future. And I wanted to kind of just give you some insights on, if your institution is doing NAC, where you might look at the differences and compare them. So NAC is institution only. AACSB is an institutional accreditation as well, though we only look at the business content within that institution, so any of the business degrees at the institutional level. There are guidelines around AQAC within NAC, which is the quality unit that handles this, and handles it for all the programs at the institution. Whereas AACSB is, again, similarly talking about strategic leadership and engagement of all stakeholders that are with that business. So if it requires that probably IQAC is involved with your AACSB accreditation in some way, right? There is this graded, I get a lot of times questions about weightages and things like that. We don't have that at AACSB, but you do have that in the NAC system. There is a more, I would say, approach that is which is trying to be a little bit more objective. So there's an online assessment, and then there's a peer review component. AACSB just has the peer review. Everything is peer reviewed. There is no online assessment. It's self-driven, so you decide, you provide a self-evaluation of where you're at, and then that gets reviewed by your peers, and your peers make the judgment. So there's a slight difference there. And we're very outcomes focused at AACSB, whereas NAC, at the point in time that I can tell, has an input-output-outcome approach. So there is a lot of input focus that remains within NAC. Yeah. So this is, I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just to give you an idea, because for NAC you submit this AQAR, and this is the data that's being collected at these institutes. And so in order to give you ideas about how you can do both, understand the data that's being collected. That data is power if you can access it. And it's systematically collected. It's a lot of work that's going into this, I can assure you, at the institutional level. And if you're aware of the data points that are in there, I'm going to talk about how you can use those for AACSB. So there are some inputs, there are outcomes. Program outcomes is one of those things. Graduate outcomes, they are tracking this stuff. They are tracking what diversity and inclusion issues are addressed. All of this stuff is being tracked by your IQAC. So what can you do? So I think for strategic planning, schools write their strategic planning a lot of times in a little box without thinking about all of these things they have access to. And so one of the things, this is an example that I created, if your mission has a focus on experiential learning, we heard somebody talk about that, right? So for NAC, you're collecting the number of student projects, right? You're collecting student satisfaction surveys. You're collecting whether or not you achieved your POs and COs. You're collecting the outcomes of your extension activities, right? So all of this data can be used to formulate a strategic goal that's for your mission, right? And this strategic goal could be increasing the quality of projects, right, available to students, and you want to monitor, so as part of your strategic plan, you're monitoring the impact of those projects on student satisfaction. So in your student satisfaction survey, you have to have a question about whether those projects had an impact on them, right? But you also talk about the competencies. When you're measuring the competencies, making sure you're meeting those competencies. So you've just taken what you're doing for NAC and said, okay, with this data, I can monitor my strategic goals, right? But it requires that you are aware of what is being collected, by whom and where and what and all of those things. But working with your IQAC, you can do that. And then again, measuring of outcomes, so you can use those things that are collected by IQAC as part of your strategic planning monitoring process if you set that up. If you've used a measure of success that they're collecting on an annual basis, you can monitor that. This is very common in Australia. In Australia, for the AACSB team, oftentimes will set up a lot of this stuff in their strategic plan. They go to their central office and they say, okay, I respect the data that you collect. I'm not going to collect this at the business school because that's extra work for us. You're already collecting this, but I need to understand when you collect it and the data timelines. I need to know because I have to report this on a 5-year annual basis for AACSB, but I also have to monitor it annually for my strategic planning process. So when can I schedule my strategic planning processes so that your data feeds into that? So you have to work with the IQAC to do that. Right? So you have to decide, are you going to maintain the data or is IQAC going to maintain it? Who is going to be the source of truth? But if you work with them on that, then you can start to use these things to your benefit. So NIRF is the ranking organization, and it's a very similar approach, the accreditation. They rank, they gather the data for the purpose of defining what is a quality institution in India, right? And one of the things that you have to be mindful of, especially if you're a school that is driving forward and wanting to be part of this ranking, is that your ranking is going to incentivize certain things at your institution. It's going to drive strategy in many ways. We see this with rankings all over the world. Rankings can drive institutional strategies. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I am just saying that it can. So if you're aware of this, you can recognize that it does. So in NIRF, they look at a 3-year weighted average. AACSB looks at a 5-year cycle. So already the data that is being collected at NIRF is different than the data that's being collected for AACSB. We expect that there's descriptions of data trends. We expect that there's a sufficiency ratio, which is not a student-faculty ratio. It's more of a teaching metric on credits. So you're going to probably have to pay attention to student-faculty ratio. You're also going to have to pay attention to how much of the teaching is done by your participating full-time, which is often full-time faculty, right? So we talk about, at NIRF, they count PRJs in Scopus and Web of Science. AACSB allows and expects something broader. So it's what you do for NIRF. You would incentivize that, obviously, and that would be part of what you're trying to do if the NIRF is an important goal of your school. But for when it comes to AACSB, there's a broader expectation. So you have to think bigger picture than you would have to for NIRF. The number of the impact metrics. So citations, a lot of times I get reports from schools and say, okay, our citations are this, and that's enough. For AACSB, that's not enough, right? Citations are important. They're an important measure, but citations are not enough. We expect a broader expectations around impact. How is your research being used? So these, you can see how these measures are good measures. Most schools will have the measures that NIRF is looking at. But AACSB will give you that flexibility and that breadth to really define some of those institutional objectives that are not covered in NIRF. And the reason why they're not covered in NIRF is simply a practicality. It is not, I'm again not saying one is worse or better than the other. There's a practicality to why they do it the way that they do it. There's a practicality to why AACSB does it. Their ranking, we're an accreditation. They actually are quite complementary in that regard. You can do more with both than you can with one. And it also, another key difference is we separate research. Research grant money earned from what you call consultancy here, which is custom programs for corporates and MDPs. Those two are separate in the AACSB system. This is another area. You can actually use all of this stuff that NIRF collects and reports on for AACSB. So placement outcomes, we expect you to report these publicly. You've checked that box when you do NIRF because you're reporting that stuff publicly. You can, how NIRF defines diversity. I expect this in all my schools when they ask them about their description of diversity. If you don't mention gender and you are in the NIRF ranking, I'm going to wonder why you've not mentioned gender for AACSB. Because if you're tracking it for NIRF, you should be tracking it for AACSB, right? So it's that the two should supplement one another. And so this is just another, just some examples, and if you're deep into AACSB, if you are tracking NIRF and you're looking to improve your outcomes in NIRF, there are ways in which you can add those incentives into your system. I'll just give an example. So NIRF looks at a consulting funding parameter. Well, if you're looking at your practice faculty, why wouldn't you have a requirement for practice qualified faculty to have a funding parameter that helps you as a collective monitor and bring up that amount so that you can achieve your NIRF ranking improvement, right? So you can put things into your AACSB system that allow you to improve your NIRF ranking and stay tracking along that same way. So again, regular faculty expectations. Whatever you expect of your regular faculty is something that you would expect for your participating faculty for AACSB. Okay. Like I said, you need to go beyond. I'm just kind of spinning through this. This will all be available to everybody after the conference. I'll share this PPT. But for AACSB, you do have to think broader because it's mission aligned. NIRF wants to get everything into a ranking order, whereas AACSB wants that broader, bigger picture, your story. So hopefully, in conclusion, we've given you some ideas about how you can be in your own context, in your own system, but still allow you to do the work of being part of an international community, and drive your school forward with that international accreditation in a way that is meaningful to you and doesn't create additional extra work. Tips for success. Shika has been talking a lot about this. To be successful, you have to have buy-in. The way you get buy-in is through bringing everybody along in that process. We're all in this to achieve that high-quality education. So if anybody ever comes to me and says, oh, the only reason we're doing this is for AACSB, my response is, then why are you doing it? AACSB is not why you do something. NBA is not why you do something. It shouldn't be. It should be your decision to achieve a certain goal or a certain outcome. And the rankings and accreditation frameworks that you choose as an institution should provide and facilitate you towards that outcome. So if you're only doing something for AACSB, it's probably because you haven't spent the time understanding how you can make this work within your own context. That takes a bit of setting up, but I can tell you from schools that have been doing this for 100 years, it's business as usual. It becomes business as usual. It's not a big extra project on the side. It's part of what drives your school towards excellence. So just keep that in mind. This is a long game. And hopefully that's been communicated today. Yeah, question?
Just not question. So I would like to, I am part of UGC, AICT, NBA, NAC. Right from NBA new manual for management, earlier it was common for engineering management. So we have traveled a lot, and I must say that now Government of India, as a part of new policy, we are coming out with one nation, one data. So everything will be, you are asking data source, so one nation, one data. And also all the comparison, and thanks both of you presented well. But if you see NAC, there are 7 criteria, some of them probably, our sustainability point of view, solar or zero wastage and many things, geotagging and all, they see different criteria. But if you look at the NIRF is the one, there is no team goes. In NBA, there is a peer team visits. AACSB visits, NAC also, even though small percentage PRT goes and visit, and some online DAVB, some third-party data evaluation collection happens. But NIRF is entirely different. But if you look at all these things, as a part of national education policy, the current NBA and NAC is going to be one body. So out of the four, one is going to be this accreditation. It is going to set a change, and there are also going to make some, we are going to make some changes in all these criteria. And I am sure ASBSB anyway, ASASB anyway, it is a transformation change comparing to AMBA and EQUIS. So in higher education, NAAC will become NAC, and NBA is going to be a part of it. So I think many things, what you are suggesting, the gap will be bridged, and our standards are also going to be like ASCSB, and maybe I think if somebody is having the NAC, it is equivalent to ASCSB kind of thing will come into picture. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
My question is related to your slide 32. This is Dr. Mosharraf Hossain. I am the ISDSI Bangladesh chapter president. I do teaching for last 30 years, and I learned that the placement of the graduates in the good institution and company matter. I didn't see any of this point in this slide. The placement of the graduate in the good companies. You have said other things.
Graduate outcomes, that's what we mean with placement. So placement record, progression.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second question is that we in Bangladesh, we are trying to bring industry expert in the class for two reasons. One is to help students to get the market-driven idea while they are a student, and also this help indirectly for replacement of the internship and sometimes for placement of the job. Do you count this industry expert in the class, any criteria for the university that, like I did my master's level study in Calgary University in Canada. There they have a strict policy that all the major subject will be taught by the industry expert. Do you have anything like this?
So they have, so for NB, I think they do have a parameter on experience. How many of your faculty have industry experience, and how much experience is one of the parameters they do track.
No ratio?
What?
No ratio for industry expert and the academician?
So in NIRF, there is a ratio of experience that they do look at. I won't get into what that ratio is. At AACSB, we expect that we allow for up to 60% of your faculty to be practitioner-oriented in some way, so practice orientation. 40% need to have that scholarly orientation. 60% can have a practitioner orientation in some fashion. And we leave that up to the school to decide what that kind of engagement with practice of those faculty looks like. Consulting is a big piece of that. Working in practice. So running a company is often a profile of a practice faculty.
Right, our time is up now.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
time is up. Yep. So that's it. So anybody who has any other questions, you can get in touch with me.
I mean, we could connect after this because they have another session lined up.
Do you have any last comment, Nat?
More cycle of ACSB has done.
I'll go back to the thing about, we started with high quality education. So I'll have comments on, basically, if you think about quality, quality is defined by the customer. For educational institutions, customer, or the industry, the employers who are going to be using the output you're producing. So whatever they specify is what's important in terms of competencies, in terms of the skills, knowledge, attitudes, all that. So you got to keep that in mind. I think AACSB definitely, serves the purpose of focusing on that. And also quality has an internal meaning in terms of internal processes, quality of internal processes. So if you combine the two, I think you'll be able to achieve high quality education along all those dimensions. That's my comment. Okay, they'll come back to in a full
So that I take back to Dr. Mitri. For whatever's happening with the NAC, they should think about those two things together. We're done.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We're just done.
Then we're done. We're done. Go ahead.
Good morning once again. On behalf of IIM Ranchi, ISDSI and Accreditation team, I would like to thank each and everyone for gracing us with your presence. I would now thank our guest, Ms. Amy Memon and Shikha Tong, who with their presentation has added immeasurable value to the gathering, I believe. Thank you so much. We are honored to have you. Thank you.
Some important announcement. Today is very hectic day and there are 5 more interesting sessions scheduled for the day, and just so that we ensure that we start on time and we finish in time. So next 12 minutes are due for tea now. We have already taken 3 minutes. We will assemble here at 12:15. Publishing in high impact journals, just 1 more minute, sir. Publishing in high impact journal, the most sought after session will start at 12:15 till 1:30, 1:30 to 2:30 lunch break, 2:30 to 3:45 developing high impact journals in India, then the case study workshop session, then women and entrepreneurship in tribal area, and there are 220 parallel presentations lined up today. So we have a very hectic schedule. Request all of you to please take the tea and come on time. Thank you very much.